of crisis to my church and the national television audience. A 20,000-member church. A television audience reaching 99 million homes. New York Times best-selling books. For decades, Pastor John Hagee built an empire that seemed impossible to shake. But today, that image is beginning to crack. Old sermons are resurfacing. Longtime critics are speaking out. Questions about his wealth, his past statements, and his ministry are growing louder than ever. Then, at 86 years old, Hagee made a surprising admission that left many wondering whether everything they believed about him was true. So, what changed? And why are so many people saying things aren't looking well for Pastor John Hagee? Let's delve in. From West Point dreams to the pulpit, for young John Hagee, church was never just something the family attended. It was the center of everything. Growing up in the Channel View area, while his parents pastored First Assembly of God, he was known throughout the congregation as Johnny, the pastor's son, who stood before adults each week to sing. His childhood revolved around church, school, and sports, shaping the discipline and confidence that would later define his life. Unlike his father, Hagee loved athletics. At Reagan High School in Houston, he became a National Honor Society student, earned varsity letters in 4 sports, and captained the football team. His leadership and academic success earned him an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, putting him on track for what seemed destined to be a military career. That future disappeared almost overnight. On the second Thursday of January 1958, 17-year-old Hagee attended a revival service at his father's church. Until then, he had planned to leave ministry behind after graduation. But during the altar call, he later said he felt an overwhelming call to dedicate his life to God. He walked to the front of the church, publicly committed his life to Christ, and accepted what he believed was a calling to full-time ministry. The very next morning, he made the decision permanent. He withdrew from high school before graduation and immediately enrolled at Southwestern Bible Institute in Waukesha, Texas. While his classmates were preparing for senior year activities, Hagee was already immersed in Bible classes, chapel services, and ministry training hundreds of miles from home. Only weeks later, on the first Sunday of March 1958, he preached his first sermon at his father's church. During the week, he studied, and on weekends, he traveled to small churches across Texas, preaching revival meetings wherever he was invited. He joined the school's Harvester Choir, toured regularly, and worked in a church furniture factory to support himself. Before turning 20, he was already balancing work, school, and ministry. Although he had abandoned West Point, Hagee never abandoned education. In 1962, he transferred to Trinity University in San Antonio on an athletic scholarship, earning a Bachelor of Science in History and Education in 1964. After graduation, he coached football, basketball, and track at Nims Middle School, where his teams won district championships. He then earned a master's degree in educational administration from North Texas State University in 1966, giving him leadership skills that would later prove invaluable in building large organizations. Throughout those years, he spent nearly every weekend traveling as a revival evangelist. Preaching to congregation after congregation sharpened the energetic style that would later define his ministry. Long before television audiences knew his name, the revival circuit had taught him how to command a room and deliver sermons that moved people. By 1966, at just 26 years old, Hagee decided to stop traveling and build something permanent. In October, he founded Trinity Church in San Antonio. The congregation expanded rapidly, outgrowing its first building within 6 years. Then in 1975, he made another unexpected move, resigning from the church he had founded to lead a struggling congregation of only about 25 members in Castle Hills. He renamed it the church and began rebuilding from the ground up. The following year, he married Diana Castro, now Diana Hagee, as the small congregation slowly began to grow. In 1987, it relocated to a much larger campus and adopted the name Cornerstone Church. Over the decades that followed, the church expanded to more than 20,000 active members, becoming one of the largest and most influential churches in Texas, building a religious empire and growing controversy. As Cornerstone Church grew, so did John Hagee's influence far beyond Texas. By the early 2000s, his ministry had become a major media operation. Through Global Evangelism Television, GTV, and John Hagee Ministries, his sermons aired on more than 160 television stations and 50 radio stations, reaching an estimated 99 million homes worldwide. The local pastor had become one of the most recognizable evangelical leaders in America. That growth brought enormous financial success. Reports from the early 2000s showed the ministry generating more than $18 million in annual revenue. While Hagee's salary and benefits drew increasing public attention, he was no longer simply leading a large church. He was running a religious organization with national reach and significant financial power. His influence expanded even further through publishing. By 2018, Hagee had written nearly 40 books, with 7 reaching the New York Times bestseller list, including 4 Blood Moons and Absolute Power. His books, television broadcasts, conferences, and political activism became part of a single powerful ministry brand. He even entered the music industry in 2011, releasing the Southern Gospel album, A Lifetime of Music, which earned 2 GMA Dove Award nominations. One of the defining themes of Hagee's preaching was prosperity. In sermons such as The Power to Get Wealth and The Decision to Prosper, he taught that God wanted believers to prosper financially. Quoting passages like Deuteronomy 8 verse 18 and Luke 6 verse 38, he encouraged generous giving, often repeating the phrase, "Givers gain." He taught that financial blessing followed faith, obedience, and generosity. While critics argued he was promoting seed theology, the idea that donations to the ministry would produce material blessings or miraculous returns, supporters saw biblical encouragement. Critics saw fundraising built on promises of prosperity. Questions also surrounded Hagee's own wealth. By 2025, estimates of his net worth ranged from $5 million to $50 million depending on the source. While the exact number remained disputed, the perception was clear. His ministry had become a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and people increasingly questioned how that wealth had been accumulated. Hagee's influence also rested on his unwavering support for Israel, a belief deeply rooted in his end-times theology. In his 2006 book, Jerusalem Countdown, he argued that future conflict involving Israel, particularly with Iran, would fulfill biblical prophecy and bring the world closer to the return of Christ. During the 2014 Ebola outbreak, he even suggested that America could be experiencing God's judgment because of policies he believed were unfavorable toward Israel. Those beliefs helped him build powerful political alliances through Christians United for Israel Coffee, which claimed 2.2 million pro-Israel households by 2015. But they also fueled controversy, with some Jewish leaders arguing that his support reflected Christian end-times theology more than genuine concern for Jewish people. The greatest criticism, however, came from comments about the Holocaust. In a sermon based on Jeremiah 16, Hagee referred to Hitler as a hunter, arguing that God had allowed the Holocaust as part of his plan to bring the Jewish people back to Israel. The remarks drew widespread condemnation, with critics accusing him of treating one of history's greatest atrocities as part of divine purpose. The controversy deepened after other statements linked Hitler to what Hagee called accursed, genocidally murderous half-breed Jews. While some of his books and sermons repeated claims that the Rothschild family controlled the Federal Reserve and global finance as part of an end-times narrative, historians and Jewish organizations criticized those claims as echoing long-standing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Political fallout and decades of controversy followed. For years, many of John Hagee's most controversial sermons remained largely unnoticed outside evangelical circles. That changed in May 2008 during the U.S. presidential campaign. On May 21st, recordings of an older sermon in which Hagee referred to Hitler as a hunter resurfaced on political blogs and cable news. The following day, Senator John McCain, who had previously welcomed Hagee's endorsement, publicly rejected it, calling the remarks deeply offensive and indefensible. As reporters uncovered more of Hagee's past comments about the Holocaust, Catholicism, and prophecy, the controversy quickly became a national political issue. The issue resurfaced again in November 2023 when Hagee was invited to deliver a prayer at the March for Israel rally in Washington, D.C., following the Hamas attacks of October 7th. Although the event was intended to show solidarity with Israel and condemn anti-Semitism, many Jewish writers and commentators immediately pointed back to Hagee's earlier Holocaust remarks and other controversial statements. Critics argued that his appearance undermined the event's message, while supporters defended his long record of support for Israel. The Holocaust controversy was only one part of a much broader pattern. Over the years, Hagee also drew criticism for his comments about Catholics, Muslims, women, and LGBTQ people, with many of those remarks resurfacing whenever his public profile grew. For decades, Hagee described the Catholic Church as an apostate church and at times associated it with the Antichrist and centuries of anti-Semitism. Those comments sparked strong backlash from Catholic leaders and became especially damaging during the 2008 election. Under mounting pressure, Hagee sent a letter to Catholic League President Bill Dona expressing regret for statements that Catholics had found offensive. The Catholic League accepted the apology, but critics continued pointing to his earlier sermons. His comments about Islam generated similar controversy. During a 2006 NPR interview, Hagee said that those who followed the Quran had a religious mandate to kill Christians and Jews. Critics accused him of portraying an entire religion as inherently violent rather than distinguishing extremists from the vast majority of Muslims. His teachings on gender also attracted criticism. Hagee promoted a traditional view of family life, emphasizing that women's primary role was as wives and mothers while criticizing feminism and changing gender roles. Supporters viewed those teachings as biblical. Opponents argued they marginalized women and reinforced outdated social expectations. Other remarks proved even more divisive. Hagee claimed the future Antichrist would be homosexual and partially Jewish, while also repeating theories about Jewish banking families, including the Rothschilds, playing a role in a future one-world government. Jewish organizations and historians criticized those statements for echoing long-standing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories despite Hagee's strong public support for Israel. His tendency to interpret current events through biblical prophecy repeatedly fueled controversy. After Hurricane Katrina, Hagee suggested the disaster reflected God's judgment on New Orleans because of the city's sin, including a planned gay pride event. In 2014, he linked the Ebola outbreak to U.S. policy toward Israel, arguing that America could already be experiencing divine judgment over Jerusalem. Later that year, he called Barack Obama one of the most anti-Semitic presidents in U.S. history, prompting criticism from the Anti-Defamation League. Hagee later said he had meant anti-Israel, but the original remark had already generated widespread backlash. Wealth, politics, and a lasting legacy of debate. As John Hagee's influence grew, so did scrutiny of his ministry's finances. In 2001, Global Evangelism Television, GTV, the nonprofit media arm of his ministry, reported more than $18 million in annual revenue on its IRS filings. Even more attention was paid to Hagee's own compensation, which totaled nearly $1.25 million that year. The package included about $540,000 from GTV, $32,000 from Cornerstone Church, and more than $411,000 in additional benefits, placing him among the highest-paid nonprofit leaders in the San Antonio area. Those figures became closely tied to his preaching on prosperity. Hagee frequently taught that financial giving led to God's blessing, telling audiences that income is controlled by giving and that there was no such thing as a fixed income in the kingdom of God. Critics argued that these teachings encouraged struggling believers to view donations as the key to financial breakthroughs, healing, or debt relief. They also questioned his interpretation of biblical passages such as Deuteronomy 28, saying promises originally made to ancient Israel were being presented as guarantees from modern-day donors. His personal lifestyle also drew attention. Some online commentators estimated his net worth at around $50 million, while other estimates were considerably lower. The San Antonio Express-News reported that his retirement trust owned a 7,969-acre ranch near Brackettville, Texas, featuring multiple lodges, barns, a ski range, and other amenities. For critics, the image of a wealthy televangelist stood in sharp contrast to the New Testament's portrayal of humble ministry. Politics added another layer of controversy. In November 2021, Cornerstone Church hosted the Reawaken America Tour, a conservative political event featuring figures such as Michael Flynn and Alex Jones. During the gathering, attendees chanted, "Let's go, Brandon," a slogan widely used as an insult toward President Joe Biden. The Freedom from Religion Foundation later urged the IRS to investigate whether the event crossed the line for a tax-exempt church, arguing that it resembled a partisan political rally. As these debates continued, Hagee also began facing health challenges. In October 2020, his son Matt Hagee announced that the then 80-year-old pastor had tested positive for COVID-19. Although he required several weeks of intensive medical care, Hagee recovered and returned to the pulpit the following month. In the years that followed, reports noted his advancing age and ongoing heart-related health issues. Yet, he continued preaching regularly and remained the public face of the ministry. Behind the scenes, however, a gradual transition was already underway. Matt Hagee increasingly took responsibility for leading Cornerstone Church, while John Hagee remained its founding pastor and most recognizable figure. Rather than stepping away completely, he continued preaching, writing, and appearing at major events as leadership slowly shifted to the next generation. The debate surrounding Hagee showed no signs of fading. When he appeared at the March for Israel rally in Washington, D.C. on November 14, 2023, longtime critics immediately revived his past statements about the Holocaust, Islam, and biblical prophecy. Supporters viewed him as one of America's strongest defenders of Israel. Critics argued that his presence overshadowed the event's message. It was a familiar pattern,